And that diffusion of responsibility leads to some very interesting things in group processing, which is why they don't want psychologists on juries, even though they call them anyway. Even though I may have to go and serve, they would probably let me go, because I know that diffusion of responsibility will cause group polarization. Because I'm not personally responsible, what you see is in groups, whatever is the prevailing opinion, it doesn't get debated objectively, it becomes stronger. With more people agreeing, you have that conformity effect. And it's not me making the decisions, it's us making the decisions. So now I'm not personally responsible for making a severe decision. We came to the decision. Groupthink is something that is a compound word without a hyphen in our jargon. And it happens. The desire for group harmony overrides the need for objective discussion, suppresses dissent. People don't dissent because they don't want to rock the boat. There's a discomfort in rocking the boat for most people. Now, some people got a personality, they're always devil's advocate. They don't mind agitating everybody else, but most of us like to be liked, remember? We like other people to like us. It's easier to go along to get along. And people do that. So if you want to have objectivity, you got to be mindful of these group effects. So it turns out that this happens in all kinds of situations. I don't know if you were going to take a test on this concept and somebody was to offer you the example of a group of people, a homeowners association, getting together, and they say, let's plant some bushes out by the opening of the subdivision. And everybody likes the person who puts forward the idea. And some person's thinking, well, gosh, what if in a couple of years they'll grow up and they'll obscure our view and we won't be able to see down either side because the bushes will obstruct our view. Maybe that's not such a good idea, but because nobody seems to be objecting, because nobody else seems to have a problem with it, because everybody likes what's going along, they tend to go along to get along. Even though they have reservations, just like an Ash's line experiment, they just go along. So the group decision's made. Well, I didn't decide it. I thought that there was a problem with it. Did you voice that a problem? Well, no. But I figured if it was a problem, other people would have voiced it. And there you have that issue. The risky shift then is the tendency for a group decision to be riskier than the average decision made by individual group members. Juries are subject to this. The pressure is to find a unanimous decision, or you don't go home. You don't go home until you come up with a unanimous decision, or until we figure it's been so long that we will allow a hung jury. The pressure is to just agree. Even if you don't, even if you have subtle reservations. In criminal cases, it's beyond the shadow of a doubt. Do you know how hard it is to establish, right? If it was beyond a shadow of a doubt, we probably wouldn't be at trial. They probably would have plea bargained. If we're at trial, there's probably some doubts. Otherwise, the defense would never mount a defense. They wouldn't bring it to trial. So now there's gray areas, but there's this idea that you have to agree. Space Shuttle Challenger blew up in midair while millions watched on TV. Horrifying tragedy. It took them a while to figure out what it was, but it turned out they knew that was a problem. O-rings, external fuel tanks, and the temperature of launch that day. The pressure on NASA to launch was great. The social pressure, they're behind schedule, they're over budget. There's an engineer says, those O-rings trouble me. In fact, there's a number of them. They trouble us because under certain conditions they might fail. But what had happened every time beforehand? Success, 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 success. We've already delayed it. We've delayed it again. It's now a very, very cool morning. And y'all know what happens to materials on cold mornings. They contract. They had actually discussed this. But the group, including higher-ups, having discussed it, reached the decision we have to be a go for launch. Everything that we worked for is now being called into question. We need to do this. And by making that risky decision, it was tragedy. But it wasn't one person being a total ass, totally disregarding the safety. They all cared about the safety of the astronauts. right? They were deeply concerned. They just were able to overlook this one thing that turned out to be the only thing that mattered that day because of this process. How do riots start? You ever say to yourself, man, I'd like to get in a riot. I sure would like to be in a riot. You think you could even start a riot if you wanted to? Yeah. Some of you might be able to. Riots are these seemingly organic things that just come out of not nowhere. There's usually a lot of pressure, a lot of tension, a lot of other variables going on. I'm going to finish up today, so y'all hang with me. We've got 4 minutes total left, but if you could hang with me a minute or two longer, we'll be done with this material today. But in a crowd, you're less identifiable. It's harder to know who you are. When you see these giant riots at sports stadiums, or after the big game is over, and the team won and they're flipping over cars, or the team lost and they're flipping over cars, right? When you finally get people accountable, individuals, because now we have things like cameras everywhere, right? Before, you got caught up in a riot and nobody ever knew you were in a riot, but now they can find you. And when you pull these people in for questioning, they don't go, you know what, I love rioting, man. I'm a riotous mother. What do they say? They say, I don't know what happened. I got caught up in the moment. I got caught up in the moment. I'm not like that. I don't usually do things like that. I don't know what came over me. It wasn't really me that night. Maybe I had a few drinks, but everybody else was doing it, and I got caught up in the moment. People do things they wouldn't normally do on alcohol, in large crowds, and behind masks. There's good research that shows just putting on a mask, people will behave differently if they can't be identified. When you're in a giant crowd and the crowd's acting a certain way, it's very easy. The bystander effect comes from diffusion of responsibility. There's a book out on this Kitty Genovese incident now, and I bought it. It was told poorly the first time, not accurately by the news source that did it. But here's the thing. This woman was murdered. It took 32 minutes. At least around 38 people or so heard it or saw it. Give me a minute, if you don't mind. We're still 2 minutes before the end of class. Usually we end 2 minutes before the end of class. And didn't do anything. At one point, somebody yelled out the window and the guy ran away. And you know what he did? No cops came. He came back and continued to stab her to death. She didn't die at the scene. She died later on the way to the hospital. And the story got out. And the story got told like this. All these people in New York watched this person get killed and they didn't do anything. Bystander apathy. People just don't care. Living in the big city desensitizes you, makes you less of a human being. And that was the explanation for a lot of people. The bystander apathy. We call it bystander effect now because it turns out you can make it happen in experimental situations. It's the way human beings behave. Not everybody saw what was happening. Not everybody knew what to make of it. Not everybody was sure they heard what they heard. If they were hearing something, maybe it's an argument between lovers and it's nothing I'm supposed to get my, mind your own business kind of a thing. People didn't know what to make of it. It was an ambiguous situation. So Latine and Darley created an ambiguous situation and put people in it experimentally. They don't know that they're in it experimentally. Smoke-filled room study. You can find it on YouTube. What happens? You go in to a room to fill out some surveys, and through the vent, smoke starts coming in. Smoke starts coming in the room. Now, smoke comes in the room, you think, well, I'll get up and talk to somebody about that. I'm going to say something. And if people were alone, they did just that. They did just that. But the mere presence of other people, diffusion of responsibility, the people in 3-person groups took, on average, 4 minutes before they did anything. At that point, you've got peak response levels in the other group of 1 person. And only 10% did. By the time here, 6 minutes in, not even half of the people have even mentioned this. What do you see when you have an emergency? You see other people standing around doing what? Nothing. Well, then there may not be an emergency. So let me hit you with this real quick. How many people had Red Cross or first aid training? Certified in it. What do they tell you to do? Here's the thing you do. If you notice an emergency, you don't treat it as ambiguous. You go up to the person. It's your job. You've been trained to do it. You carry a card that says you are doing it, and you go and ask them, sir, ma'am, are you okay? Are you okay? Right? You take responsibility. In other words, the training tells you it's your job to interpret it whether it's an emergency or not. And here's the other thing. When people are around, it's not that they don't care. It's that they don't know what to do or think somebody else is more qualified to do it, or they're not sure something's up. What do they tell you to do when you know somebody's down and they're hurt? They say this: you call 911 and you go get the AED machine. And guess what happens when you do that?
People do it.
They do it. Social influence. Y'all have a great day. That's all we're going to hit.